Her lunchbox was empty. Not food. Just an apology.
Help my daughter first. I don't accept pity.
This is profit versus dignity, and the vote begins now.
Her lunchbox was empty, except for one sentence, "I'll try tomorrow." He was the man who made tomorrow impossible. Stay with me. In the next few minutes, you'll see how a single note rewires a billionaire, unmasks a board that worships numbers, and begins a table long enough for every child. The bell had just scattered voices into the courtyard when Matteo Valen stopped at the cafeteria door. From outside came the faint chime of a barrio church bell, soft against the heavy Sevilla sun. The smell of azahar, orange blossoms drifting from nearby streets, slid into the hall with the heat. Light bounced off red-tiled roofs beyond the window, painting the cracked floor in shifting gold. Inside, a steel cart rattled behind the serving line, metal upon metal, a tired metronome keeping time. The air smelled of warm bread and tomato, but most trays were already empty. Laughter rose, then fell. Along the far wall, paint worn thin where children had leaned for decades. Framed by blue and white azulejo tiles, a small girl sat with a pink lunchbox that had lost its shine. She looked up like a maitre d' welcoming a late guest. "Welcome, sir," she said, bright and serious at once. "Table for one?" Her braids brushed her shoulders. Her shoes swung inches above the tile. Matteo sat. The bench groaned under his tailored suit. He did not belong here. This was no marble boardroom in Madrid, no gala under chandeliers. Only the squeak of sneakers, the murmur of teachers, the slap of a mop across Andalusian tile. "If there's a table available," he said, his voice catching. "It is," she said. "Today we have pasta with magic sauce. Dessert is a surprise." She opened the lunchbox with a flourish learned from joy, not food. Inside lay a folded slip of paper. Her fingers moved quick as if speed could turn ink into bread. But he saw the words, "Lo siento, no hay comida hoy. Intentaré mañana." "Mama, I'm sorry, there's no food today. I'll try again tomorrow. Love, Mom." He had signed orders that closed factories in Cadiz, orders that saved margins but erased lives. He had read charts that made families vanish into percentages. Nothing on those polished slides had ever cut like this single line written in a tired hand. The girl, Lucia, poured invisible water. She sprinkled invisible salt. She set an invisible plate before him, formal, careful. He lifted an invisible fork because pretending with her was less cruel than silence. "The sauce is excellent," he said, the lie heavy on his tongue. Her smile bloomed. "It's a family recipe." He fixed on details so his chest would not split. The crescent scratch on the lunchbox lid, the flicker of a fluorescent bulb, the echo of distant church bells bleeding through the window. A cafeteria worker passed, a lanyard peeking from her apron, Valen Logistics, stamped clear in corporate font. His company, his arteries feeding this place where a child served imaginary food. "Do you come here every day?" he asked. "Except when it rains too much," she said. "Then my restaurant closes." She leaned close, conspiratorial. "But tomorrow will be open again. Will you come back?" Promises had always lived on letterhead for him. Markets, not people, yet her eyes left no room for escape. He nodded once. "Yes, I'll come back." A whistle cut the air. Chairs scraped. A teacher clapped twice, and the room shifted into lines. Lucia closed the empty box with practiced grace and held it as if it were full. She dipped her head at him, half curtsy, half bow, then ran. Sunlight traced her across the tiles, then snapped away when the door closed. Matteo stayed. Silence pooled on the floor. He could still see the hand that wrote that note, pressed against a counter that leaned or a bed that sagged. Choosing apology over hunger. His phone vibrated. Board prep, EPS guidance. Investor call. Sevilla Cadiz optimization. He dismissed both with a thumb that didn't feel like his. In a glass panel, he saw himself, efficient, cold, exact. A man described by numbers, not by belonging. A worker paused her cart. "Se acabó, señor." "We're finished," he nodded. The bench scraped loud as he stood. At the door, he stopped. Turned back. Returned to the little table. He placed his palm on the plastic lid, still warm under the light. "I'll come back," he said, testing the weight of a promise. It felt less like a lie, more like a key long hidden. Beside the exit, flyers clung to a corkboard. A food drive that missed its target. A city notice about route optimization stamped with his own company's logo. Dotted lines on charts flashed in his mind. Not lines at all, but arteries. Outside, the sun pressed hard. The air smelled of azahar drifting through narrow streets. He loosened his tie. The church bell rang again, steady, indifferent. He rested his forehead against his car's cool glass. Hearing the old rhythm bang to be let back in. Calls, numbers, profit wrapped as progress. Question for you. If you found that note in your city, what would you do before sunset? He drew a blank card, wrote the sentence he couldn't unhear, and slid it into his pocket like a confession. "I'll try again tomorrow." Not this time. He turned from the car. Back toward the corridor lined with azulejo tiles, toward a staircase he had not yet climbed. Above the bakery on the corner, a door waited. The staircase above the bakery was narrow, its stone steps worn concave by generations of feet. The smell of yeast still clung to the air, though the ovens below had long gone cold. Mateo followed Lucia upward, his polished shoes out of place against walls where paint peeled in flakes. Azulejo tiles framed the first landing, their blue and white patterns chipped but still bright. Outside a small window, the red roof tiles of Sevilla caught the late sun, glowing like embers. Lucia skipped ahead, sunflower lunchbox bouncing against her hip. She pressed an ear to a door, then pushed it open with the certainty of a child. "Mama, I'm home." The apartment was smaller than one of Mateo's guest bathrooms. A single bed pressed against the wall, blanket folded with stubborn care. A hot plate sat beside a cracked sink. Light fell through one narrow window, filtered by a curtain faded to near transparency. On the table lay envelopes with red lettering that needed no translation. Overdue, final notice, disconnect. On the bed sat Isabella Alvarez. Mid-30s, though illness carved deeper years across her face. She tried to sit straighter when Lucia pulled her hand. Her voice carried both softness and resolve. "This is Senor Valen, the one who brought me the new lunchbox." Isabella inclined her head. "I don't know what to say. My daughter does not usually bring home strangers." Mateo lowered himself onto a wooden chair that creaked under his weight. He felt like an intruder in a sacred place. "Your daughter is extraordinary," he managed. "She has a way of making the world brighter." Isabella smiled faintly. "She carries more than a child should. But she keeps us both standing." Her eyes flicked to the envelopes, then back. Pride forced her chin higher. "Help her first." "I don't accept pity." The silence thickened. Outside, church bells tolled vespers, their sound climbing the stairwell like smoke. Mateo searched for ground. "Lucia told me you worked in Cadiz. At the textile factory?" Something flickered across Isabella's face. Pride, pain, both. "Yes, 11 years. My mother before me. We thought it secure, but then the orders slowed. The manager said costs were too high. They gathered us in the break room, read names from a list. Mine was one of them. Mateo knew that list. He remembered the Rome meeting, the charts that turned livelihoods into savings. At the time, it was ink, not breath. Sitting here, it was air leaving a woman's lungs. Isabella's voice remained steady. "I found work where I could. Cleaning offices at night. Mending clothes for neighbors. It was never enough, but it was something. When sickness came," she looked away toward her daughter unpacking crayons. Then she learned to do more for herself. The table shook slightly as Lucia spread paper and markers. She drew fast, bold strokes and colors too bright for the dim room. She turned the page toward Mateo with a flourish. 3 figures sat at a table. A woman with long dark hair, a little girl with braids, and a tall man in a suit. "That's me, that's Mama, and that's you. You came to dinner." Something cracked inside him. He had spent decades erecting walls, letting numbers insulate him from names. Now a child's drawing breached every defense. He traced the paper's edge. "Do you want me to keep this?" Lucia nodded. "Yes, because if you keep it, you have to come back. Otherwise, it won't be true. The air in the room shifted. Isabella watched him closely, suspicion layered with hope. On the corner of the drawing, Matteo saw 3 plates filled, not empty. A wish disguised as art. He folded the paper with care and slipped it into his jacket. The motion felt heavier than signing any acquisition. From the corner of the table, an envelope slipped loose. The seal bore a logo he knew too well, a subsidiary of Valen Holdings. The ink was unmistakable, the stamp he himself had authorized. The layoff that crushed this family carried his mark. His pulse slowed, thick in his ears. For a moment he wanted to leave, to let coincidence excuse the truth. But Lucia's eyes carried no suspicion, only trust. Trust that could not survive a lie. He met Isabella's gaze. She said nothing, but the silence spoke of battles fought with too little armor. He heard his own breath sound foreign, as if he had stepped out of his skin. Question for you. Who signs the orders where you work? And do they know whose names they erase? He rose finally, the drawing pressed against his chest. The church bell outside struck again, sharp and unrelenting. It echoed through the narrow apartment like a verdict. The glass tower in Madrid gleamed like a blade. Mateo's driver pulled to the curb, but he dismissed him with a wave. He wanted no escort, no shield of tinted glass. Inside, the lobby smelled of polished stone and espresso. Elevators whispered their ascent, screens flickering with numbers rising too fast. At the 32nd floor, the boardroom waited. A long table of glass stretched beneath chandeliers that caught the morning light. Around it sat men and women in tailored suits, tablets ready, eyes sharp. On the wall, a screen glowed with graphs, margins, and the words, Sevilla Cadiz Optimization, net plus 14.7%. Camila Roche, CFO, stood at the head. Her voice carried the smooth edge of certainty. Our restructuring has delivered exactly as projected. Consolidation of the Cadiz textile division improved efficiency by 18%. Logistics costs fell another 7%. Shareholder guidance remains strong. We are preparing a special dividend announcement. Nods traveled the table. Ortega, the independent chairman, tapped his pen once. Discipline, he said. Markets reward discipline. Mateo sat without speaking. The window behind him framed the skyline, towers stabbing at the sky. He looked instead at the reflection of his own hand, still trembling faintly. Finally, he cleared his throat. I want to revisit the Cadiz layoffs. The room shifted. A few glances, half smiles. Camilla arched an eyebrow. Revisit? Chairman, those measures saved us millions. The factory was underperforming. You yourself signed. I know what I signed. Mateo cut in, sharper than intended. And I know what it cost. Ortega leaned forward. Mateo, efficiency is not cruelty. It is survival. Without discipline, we invite collapse. Mateo drew a folder from his briefcase, its edges worn from the night before. What we call efficiency has faces. Do you know the percentage of children in Sevilla who come to school without breakfast? Camilla's lips tightened. With respect, this is not a social ministry. We answer to investors. Mateo flipped a page. 1 in 5. Studies show those children score 20% lower in literacy, 30% in math. The cost of 1 meal a day is less than 1% of our quarterly profit. Less than the champagne budget for our investor summit. Laughter, clipped and uneasy, circled the table. One director muttered, "Lunch doesn't move EPS." The phrase landed like a slap. Mateo's voice hardened. Neither do funerals, until they pile up enough to disrupt labor supply. Is that the calculus we want? To treat hunger as externality? Camilla's tone sharpened. You're proposing we divert dividends into soup kitchens? That we trade investor trust for charity? Mateo met her gaze. Not charity, investment. If a child eats, she learns. If she learns, she works. If she works, she contributes. That is return. The silence stretched. A director shifted in his chair. Ortega's pen stopped tapping. Mateo laid down the final page. His voice dropped, heavy. I know this because I saw her. Because the mother of that child worked in Cadiz, and because the order that dismissed her carried my signature. The room froze. Camilla blinked first. You're saying this? Publicly, in the minutes? Yes, Mateo said. His pulse was steady now. Record it. Record that I signed the order that emptied her table. Record that I refused to hide behind euphemisms any longer. The table sat in stunned silence. The numbers on the screen glowed on, indifferent. Ortega broke it at last. You realize what you're admitting could expose us legally, financially. You would rather confess guilt than preserve stability? Mateo did not flinch. I would rather tell the truth than feed the lie. No one spoke. The hum of air conditioning sounded like judgment. Outside, a church bell carried faintly across Madrid's roofs, echoing the ones that tolled in Sevilla the night before. Mateo closed the folder. We will investigate Cadiz. We will review every name. And we will not pay another cent in special dividends until we fund meals for every child in our schools. A director shook his head in disbelief. You've gone mad. Maybe, Mateo said. Or maybe we've been mad all along, treating dignity as expendable. He rose, the chair legs screeching against polished stone. His voice was iron now. Mark this. Dignity is a KPI. If we forget that, the market will remember for us. The boardroom held its breath. If a CEO admits his own mistake, should the board punish him? Or give him the chance to make it right? The order went out at dawn. Every file from the Cadiz layoffs was to be reopened, every signature reviewed, every decision traced. By noon, Mateo sat in a conference room, not the glass stage of the board, but a smaller chamber buried deep in headquarters. Stacks of boxes lined the walls, folders thick with names and numbers. He opened the first. A worker with 10 years. Loyalty dismissed in 6 words. Position made redundant. No appeal granted. Another file. 20 years. Gone with a single stamp. He ran his hand across the papers. The ink felt like blood. Investigators entered. Auditors. Lawyers, HR staff. All uneasy, sensing this was not routine. Check the metrics, Mateo said quietly. Find out who profited most when lives were erased. Hours passed. Fluorescent lights hummed above their heads. Outside the windows, Madrid tilted toward evening, bells ringing faint from a nearby church. At last, an auditor approached. She placed a slim folder before him. Her voice carried the weight of accusation. There were incentives. She said, managers received bonuses for headcount reduction. The more they cut, the higher the reward. The page showed it clearly. A neat table. Column 1. Quota achieved, column 2. Payout. Mateo felt his chest tighten. Profit tied directly to absence. Wealth earned from silence. He turned the page and froze. A familiar name. Isabella. Alvarez. Dismissed without review. Attached was a certificate, production line management. Level 2, earned just weeks before the layoffs. Filed, then ignored. Mateo spoke low. She studied at night. She prepared for more. And we never even looked. The room held its breath. Another report surfaced, a production log from the months before the closure. One entry flagged in bold, line failure, main machine down. Below, a note, Alvarez reorganized workflow, shipment saved. Deadline met, he whispered it aloud. She saved us, and we cut her anyway. Silence deepened. The truth weighed heavier than graphs ever could. Then, an interruption. An assistant hurried in, clutching a sealed envelope. This arrived by courier. No sender, Mateo broke the seal. Inside, a printed email chain. Anonymous address, time-stamped 3 days before the Cadiz announcement. It detailed trades, short positions opened against Valen stock, massive bets placed on decline. And at the bottom, one name surfaced, Camila Rocher, his CFO. The page trembled in his hands. Camila, who preached discipline. Camila, who defended layoffs as survival. She had bet against her own company, profited from collapse she helped engineer. Mateo looked at Ortega, seated stiff across the table. He laid the papers down slowly, like evidence in a trial. I am calling for suspension, he said, effective immediately. Camila Rocher is to be removed until this is investigated. Ortega's eyes narrowed. This is serious? Do you have proof this isn't fabricated? Mateo pushed the papers. Forward, timestamp trades, anonymous. Whistleblower, too precise to ignore. the directors around the table shifted, some frightened, some eager, all waiting to see who would fall. First, Mateo's voice rose, firm but deliberate. I will not allow her to hide behind efficiency while gambling on ruin. We cut families for her bonus. Then she bet against our blood. Suspend her. Now. The silence cracked. One director cleared his throat. Without hard evidence, suspension could be challenged. Ortega is right. Mateo stood. His chair scraped sharp against the stone floor. You want evidence? He held up the files. Here is evidence. Certificates. Ignored, loyalty discarded, lives. Reduced to metrics. If we need more, then keep digging. But Camilla does not get to sit at this table while we do. His words struck like a gavel. Some heads nodded. Others remained cold. Ortega leaned back at, last, we'll vote, he said. Temporary. Suspension pending investigation. Nothing more. Mateo accepted. A battle half won. But the war was moving into daylight. He gathered the files, the email, the drawing still folded in his pocket, faces and numbers together, truths that could no longer be hidden. He walked to the window. The sky over Madrid burned orange. Rooftops glowing, church bells carried across the city. Heavy with judgment, he spoke softly, more to himself than to them. Numbers don't lie, but they never tell the whole truth. He turned back. Eyes hard. Start preparing the review of every layoff. Tonight. No delays. The room stirred. Reluctant but obedient. The tide had shifted. Mateo pressed his hand against the folder. One last time. The drawing inside felt warm against his chest. Lucia's. Table with 3 people. Not empty. Not erased. He whispered. Almost a vow. This is where it begins. Question for you. If you were in Ortega's seat, would you defend the numbers? Or the people behind them? The board convened again, not in routine session, but an emergency gathering. The agenda read one line only. Governance review. Extraordinary. The glass walls of the tower looked colder today. Rain pressed against them, sliding in crooked lines. Inside, the table gleamed under harsh light. Camilla Roche entered last. She wore confidence like armor, but her eyes flicked once toward Mateo, then away. Ortega called the session to order. We have 3 proposals, all related to recent revelations. His voice was flat, judicial, not the rhythm of markets, but of judgment. Camilla stood quickly, her tone cut like steel. This circus undermines credibility. Valen Holdings cannot be hijacked by sentiment. Our investors expect discipline. Not dramatics, she turned to the directors. Remember, Sevilla applauded us when margins rose. Markets rewarded us. This, Mesa Abierta Idea, it's nothing but cheap PR. Murmurs rippled, some nodding, some shifting uneasily. Mateo rose slowly. No notes. Only the folder pressed against his chest. Cheap PR, he said. Then explain why our own CFO bet against us. Explain. Why children eat air while we toast dividends. Explain. Why the woman who saved our shipment was thrown aside like scrap. Camilla's smile faltered, but only slightly. Allegations. Anonymous leaks. Nothing proven. Mateo opened the folder. He spread papers across the glass like cards in a trial certificates ignored. Bonus charts tied to dismissals trades time-stamped before. Announcements. He didn't shout. His voice dropped low, steady, each word sharp enough to leave a mark. Dignity has a cost. Yes, but so does cruelty. Which cost do you want to own? The room leaned forward. Ortega raised a hand. We will vote. 3 proposals. 1. Reinstate Isabella Alvarez with full compensation. 2. Pilot Mesa Abierta in all Sevilla schools. 12 months. 3. Suspend Camilla Roche pending regulator review. A pause. Rain tapped harder on the windows, as if the city itself was waiting. Camilla laughed, brittle. Pilot lunch programs? Do we report apple slices in our quarterly filings now? Mateo leaned forward. Report this. Cost. Less than 1% of net profit. Return. Higher attendance, stronger workforce, lower turnover, ROI that every serious economist recognizes. We cannot afford not to. The room split, directors whispered. Some clenched jaws, others crossed arms. The divide was clear. Profit on one side, dignity on the other. Then, a surprise. One director, long loyal to margins, pulled a tablet forward. On the screen, a clip played. Lucia, standing in a school hallway, sunflower lunchbox in hand. Her voice trembled but held firm. I just want tomorrow. To be the day my mama doesn't have to say, I'm sorry, anymore. Silence. Even Camilla's breath caught. The director closed the tablet. He looked around. I changed my vote. Shock scattered the table. Ortega nodded slowly. Very well. We proceed to vote. Hands raised, one after another, tallying against the rhythm of rain. The results. Proposal 1, passed, Isabella reinstated. Proposal 2, passed, Mesa. Abierta to launch, Proposal 3, passed by a single vote. Camilla suspended. Her chair scraped back violently. She gathered her papers, but her words were a hiss. You've doomed us all. Markets do not forgive sentiment. Mateo didn't flinch. Markets can learn. Children cannot wait. She left. The door slammed. Rain swallowed the echo. The board sat, stunned, some relieved, some resentful. Mateo turned toward Ortega. His voice softened, almost weary. This isn't victory. It's a beginning. We chose people today. Let's see if we can keep choosing them. Tomorrow, the bell of a nearby church rang through the storm, a sound older than markets, older than profit. If you had to choose today, would you side with the margin line or with the little girl holding a lunchbox? The train to Sevilla cut through rain and sun. Mateo sat alone, the folder on his lap. Inside, files, votes, signatures. But heavier than paper was the drawing folded small. Lucia's table of 3. When the train slowed into Santa Justa, the air changed. Warm, thick with the scent of azahar. Street vendors called from under. Umbrellas. Red tiles gleamed. Wet above whitewashed walls. He walked through. Narrow alleys, past shuttered shops, past the bakery whose ovens had gone cold. And up the staircase worn smooth by centuries. Lucia opened the door. Before he could knock, her braids swung as she leapt! You came back! Her laugh filled the small apartment, bouncing against cracked plaster and faded curtains. She clutched the sunflower lunchbox like a prize. Isabella appeared behind her, leaning on the doorframe, tired, wary, but steadier than before. She searched his face. Why are you here this time? Mateo entered quietly. He placed the folder on the table, on top of envelope stamped overdue. I spoke with the board. You have your job back, not at a sewing machine. In management, where you should have been long ago. Isabella's breath caught. Her hands tightened on the doorframe. Why would you do this? Out of guilt? Out of pity? Mateo shook his head. Out of responsibility? You earned it years ago. We failed you. This isn't a favor. It's repair. For a long moment, the room held still. Only the hum of a single bulb overhead, only the street bell faint in the distance. Finally, Isabella nodded once. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. I don't want charity. I want to earn it. Mateo lowered his gaze. You already did. Lucia tugged his sleeve. Impatient with grown-up silence. What about the restaurant? Can we open for everyone now? Mateo smiled faintly. Yes. Mesa Abierta begins. Every child in Sevilla will eat. No more empty lunchboxes. Her eyes widened. Her laughter rang like glass shattering darkness. That afternoon, the program launched. Cafeterias once noisy with emptiness, now filled with clatter of trays. Bread, fruit, hot meals steaming in long lines. Lucia stood at the front, her sunflower box on display. Today's special, everything is real, she announced. Children cheered. Teachers wiped eyes quietly. Reporters clicked cameras. But Matteo stood back, hands in his pockets. Watching Dignity return plate by plate, he noticed Isabella at the side, not in silence this time, but directing volunteers, coordinating deliveries, already shaping the work as her own. He walked to her. "You were right," he said. "Help without strings is rare. But this time, the only string is promise." She studied him carefully, then looked at Lucia, handing apple slices with pride. Her lips softened. "Maybe promises can be real if you keep showing up." The words settled deep. He thought of contracts signed in boardrooms, clauses, penalties, exit terms. None of them felt as binding as this simple condition: keep showing up. As the day ended, Lucia climbed onto a bench, her voice carrying across the hall. "Tomorrow," she declared, "we open again!" The children clapped. The bell above the courtyard chimed the hour. The smell of azahar drifted in, mixing with bread and fruit. Matteo stood in the doorway, the drawing in his pocket warm against his chest. He thought of Camilla's sneer, "Markets do not forgive sentiment," and of Ortega's caution, "Discipline sustains." But here, discipline meant meals served on time. Here, markets were measured in laughter, and dividends paid in belonging, he whispered under his breath. To the girl on the bench, to the woman steady beside her, to the city that had forced his eyes open. This is profit worth keeping. The factory floor in Cadiz hummed again, not with despair this time, but with a pulse of renewal. Workers gathered near the entrance. Curious, skeptical, word had spread fast. A dismissed seamstress was returning, not as a hand on the line, but as a manager. Isabella Alvarez walked slowly through the gates. Her steps carried both weight and defiance. She wore no jewels, no grand suit, just steady shoes and a plain jacket. But the way she held herself, chin raised, shoulders squared, shifted the air. Matteo followed behind, silent, not as a savior, as a witness. Inside, rows of machines clattered. The scent of oil and cotton hung thick. Sunlight fell in strips through tall windows, glinting off the Andalusian tiles that edged the old floor. Supervisors approached. Some offered quick nods, others frowned. Unsure, a woman they had once cast aside was now to lead. Matteo addressed them briefly. "This factory runs on skill, not fear. You will listen to her, because she has kept this place alive before, and she will again." Then he stepped back. The stage belonged to her. Isabella's voice carried, steady as the whir of machines. "I know what it means to watch orders vanish. Know what it means to fear each paycheck is the last. No, because I stood exactly where you stand now." Eyes shifted, some softened, some held doubt, she continued. "But I also know solutions live here, on this floor, in your hands. Years ago, when the main line failed, we didn't wait for Madrid, we reorganized. We saved the shipment. We can do that again, not by cutting people, but by trusting them." A murmur spread, old memories stirred, faces recalled nights of scrambling, of improvising, of surviving together. She unrolled a chart across a workbench, not fancy. Hand-drawn grids, colored markers. "This is a flexible shift map. It lets us cover sick days without collapsing output. It balances loads. It saves 6% production capacity." Small numbers, but enough to matter. Supervisors leaned closer. Questions rose, technical, sharp. Isabella answered with calm precision. Not theory, practice. By the time she finished, the doubt had thinned, not vanished, but cracked open. Matteo watched in silence. He saw more than a manager reclaiming ground. He saw the weight of dignity returning. Not gifted, earned. At the far end of the hall, a bell chimed the hour. Its sound echoed through brick and beam, mixing with the rhythm of machines. Workers drifted back to stations, yet their steps were different, straighter, less resigned. Isabella remained at the bench, hands flat against the paper. She looked once at Matteo. Her eyes were steady, but her words were quiet. Repair is not forgiveness. Do you understand? Mateo nodded. Yes, but repair is a start. For the first time, a faint smile broke her guarded face. Not wide, not easy, but real. As the shift carried on, he left the floor. He passed tiled walls patterned with blue and white, the style of old Andalusian artisans. They gleamed under factory light, reminders that beauty could survive even in places built for toil. Outside, the air smelled of salt from the nearby coast. Church bells rang from Cadiz's cathedral, folding into gull cries above the port. Mateo paused. The sound pressed against him, like a reminder. This was bigger than one. Factory. It was culture. It was memory. It was the weight of every signature he had ever written, he whispered into the coastal wind. We're not done. Not yet. Question for you. If you were standing on that floor, would you trust her map? Or the old numbers that cut you down before? The audit spread like fire. What began in one room in Madrid now reached across the entire company. Teams pulled files from warehouses, contracts, from archives, memos long buried under digital. Dust, Mateo demanded one thing only. Show me every name, every reason, every reward tied to a dismissal. The reports piled high, charts of quotas, bonus ledgers, signatures of managers celebrating cuts as victories. An investigator entered. With a thick binder, she laid it open before Mateo. Rows of payouts glared back. Target met, 50. Heads removed. Bonus, $200,000. Target exceeded, 75 heads removed. Bonus, $300,000. The ink did not fade with time. It stung sharper. Every line was a knife. Mateo rubbed his temples. Profit bought from silence. Efficiency stained with betrayal. He spoke low, to no one in particular. We were paying them to erase lives. Not to build. To erase. But the files told only half. The rest lived in voices. Auditors traveled to Cadiz. They sat in kitchens, in union halls, in narrow bars with chipped counters. Workers spoke, one recalled handing. In his badge after 20 years, another described learning of her dismissal from a guard at the gate. No warning, no appeal, just absence. And again, the same phrase surfaced. We were numbers, not people. The investigators wrote it down each time. The phrase became refrain, evidence of culture, not accident. Among the testimonies came stories of Isabella. She kept us moving when machines failed. She taught younger seamstresses tricks to save time without losing quality. She studied nights, wanted to rise. Her name appeared everywhere. Like a thread woven through the broken cloth, Mateo felt the weight double. This was not one woman's case. It was a mirror. Then came the envelope, delivered by hand. No sender, no return. Inside, printouts.emails.timestamped logs. Subject line, trade opportunities, pre-layoff. The content was brutal in its clarity. Short positions placed days before announcements. Millions wagered on decline, and one recurring sender, Camilla Rocher. Her language was cold, efficient. Cuts in Cadiz will ensure the dip-dot recommend maximizing exposure. Mateo closed his eyes. His stomach turned. This was no theory. This was exploitation turned into private fortune. He carried the pages to Ortega, spread them on the desk like broken glass. Ortega's jaw tightened. If this is true, it goes beyond us. Regulators will swarm, shareholders will revolt. Mateo's reply was quiet, but unyielding. Then let them come. Better revolt than rot. The next board session was brutal. Camilla sat stiff, denying, deflecting. Anonymous. Leaks cannot condemn me. Anyone could fabricate this. But Mateo had prepared. He displayed the trade. Timestamps against internal memos she herself had signed. The pattern was undeniable. She knew before the public. She profited, while others starved. He spoke slowly, deliberately, like a prosecutor in open court. You called Mesa Abierta cheap PR. But tell me, Camila, what do you call betting against your own people? What do you call cashing in on hunger? The room stilled. No one defended her. Even her closest allies looked away. Ortega cleared his throat. Suspension stands. Further, this file goes to regulators. Camila's face hardened, but her silence admitted more than words. She gathered her papers. Her heels struck the floor like hammers as she left. The door shut. The room exhaled. Mateo remained standing. His hand rested on Lucia's drawing still, folded in his jacket pocket. He thought of her words. Tomorrow we open again. He turned to the directors. This is not about punishment alone. It is about prevention. No more bonuses. For erasing heads. No more treating families as collateral. Now, efficiency means humanity. Some resisted. Some muttered. But no one spoke against him outright. The tide had turned. That night, walking out of headquarters, Mateo paused in the rain. Madrid's streets gleamed under yellow lamps. In the distance, a small church bell rang midnight. He whispered to the night, to the city, to himself. This is not repair yet, but it is the road toward it. If you learned your company rewarded firings like trophies, would you stay silent or speak until the walls cracked? The boardroom filled before dawn, chairs scraped against polished glass, faces tight, some pale, others hardened like stone. The agenda glowed on the screen. Extraordinary session, governance and future strategy. Camilla Roche entered flanked by lawyers, suspended. Yes, but not defeated. She sat with arms crossed, eyes fixed on Mateo. Ortega cleared his throat. We meet to settle 3 motions. Reinstatement of Isabella Alvarez, pilot of Mesa Abierta across Sevilla, and disciplinary referral of our CFO. He paused, scanning the table. Debate will be recorded. Votes binding. The air crackled. Even the rain outside seemed to wait. Camilla stood first. Her voice sliced the silence. This company is not a charity. Markets do not bend to sob stories. If we begin feeding children, what next? Paying mortgages? Buying shoes? Some chuckled. Others looked away. She pressed harder. You cannot run an empire on pity. Investors expect return, not soup kitchens. And suspending me? On leaks, on fabricated emails? You will destroy confidence and yourselves. Her lawyers nodded, shuffling papers like shields. Mateo rose slowly. No. Papers in hand. Only Lucia's folded drawing in his pocket. You speak of empires. I speak of families. You speak of markets. I speak of children eating air. His voice did not rise. It thickened. Each word deliberate. Efficiency is not our God. Dignity is. And if you want proof, look at the numbers you worship. He tapped. The screen charts appeared. Attendance. Rates in schools with free meals. Productivity. Gains in companies with stable. Families. Turnover drops when workers trust. Leadership. Less than 1%. Of profit funds, Mesa Abierta got 1%. And the return? Measured not in EPS, but in futures unbroken. The room stirred. Directors leaned forward. Caught between instinct and evidence, Camilla scoffed. Dreams don't move markets? Mateo faced her squarely. No, but fraud does. And you bet against us, against Cadiz, against children, against the very company. You swore to serve. He slid the printed trades across the table. The timestamps glared back. No one spoke. Ortega broke the silence. Enough. We proceed to vote, he read. Aloud. Motion 1. Reinstate Isabella Alvarez with compensation. Hands lifted. 1 by 1. Majority. Approved. Isabella's name echoed in the chamber. A seamstress turned manager, now vindicated. Motion 2. Pilot Mesa Abierta in Sevilla schools. Hesitation, murmurs. But then, hands rose. Slim majority. Approved. Mateo exhaled. Quiet. Steady. Children would eat. Motion 3. Suspend. Camilla Roche. Refer evidence to regulators. The room froze. Votes split. Deadlocked. Then, one director, long loyal to Camilla, unlocked his tablet. On the screen, a clip played. Lucia in her cafeteria. Sunflower lunchbox pressed against her chest. Her voice wavered. but her words cut. Through the silence, I just want tomorrow to be the day my mama doesn't have to say I'm sorry anymore. The director closed the tablet. His hand rose. The motion passed by one vote. Camilla's face burned. She gathered her papers, her lawyers trailing. Her words hissed at the door. You've signed your ruin. Markets never forgive sentiment. Mateo did not move. He whispered back, just loud enough. Then let them learn forgiveness. The door slammed. Rain drowned the echo. The board sat stunned. History had shifted, not by graphs, but by a child's voice. Ortega leaned forward. Hands clasped. This meeting is adjourned. The gavel fell, a sound sharp, but strangely fragile. Question for you. If a single child's words could tip $1 billion vote, what would your voice be worth in the right room? The rain had lifted by the time Mateo reached Sevilla. Evening sunlight spilled across white walls, the scent of azahar heavy in the streets. He walked quickly through narrow alleys, past tiled courtyards, past children playing football with a battered ball. At the bakery steps, Lucia was waiting. Her braids danced as she ran to him. You came back! Did they listen? Her voice carried urgency, like she already knew the stakes. Mateo knelt. He held her, shoulders gently. They listened. Tomorrow, your mama walks back into the factory, not as a number, as a leader. Lucia's eyes widened. She spun toward the apartment, shouting, Mama! It's true! Isabella appeared at the doorway. No apron tonight. No exhaustion carved as deep as before. But her skepticism lingered. Mateo spoke quietly. The board approved Mesa Abierta. Every child in Sevilla will eat. Your city will never see another empty lunchbox. Isabella's breath caught. Her hands pressed against the frame. Promises are easy in marble. Rooms. Will you stand here when they resist? Mateo nodded slowly. Not as a visitor, as a witness, as someone who signs and stays. For a moment, neither moved. The bells of a small church nearby rang the hour. Pigeons scattered across the square. Then Lucia broke the silence. Can we see it? The cafeteria with real food? The next morning, the school buzzed like a festival. Trays lined the tables. Bread, fruit, hot plates of rice and chicken. Children crowded the room. Some hesitant, others wide-eyed with disbelief. Lucia stood proudly at the front. Her sunflower lunchbox sat open on the counter. But this time it wasn't empty. She placed apple slices inside, handing them out like tickets. Today's special, she declared, is everything you can see. Her classmates laughed. Not at her, but with her. For the first time, her restaurant was real. Teachers whispered to each other, their eyes bright. One said, I've never seen them so alive at lunch. Mateo stayed near the doorway. He didn't step forward, didn't make speeches. He simply watched. Watched Lucia host her table. Watched children eat without shame. Watched dignity rise with every bite. Isabella stood beside him. She crossed her arms, but her lips softened. You know this is only one city, she said. Others will ask. Others will need. Mateo nodded. Yes, and we will answer. But beginnings matter. Sevilla begins here. She studied him for a long moment. Then she whispered, Repair takes time. Don't disappear before it's done. Outside, the air was warm. The cathedral bells chimed noon. Vendors shouted from stalls of oranges and olives. Mateo paused at the corner. Children's laughter spilled from the windows behind him. The sound rose, bright and unstoppable. For the first time in years, he felt lighter leaving a building than entering it. Not profit, not power, but presence. Instead of a question, let me leave you with this image. A lunchroom once filled with silence, now alive with voices. A girl with a sunflower box, finally serving something real. And a man who once measured life in margins, learning what it means to belong. The factory gates opened before sunrise. Workers shuffled in, their steps heavy with routine. But something was different. At the entrance stood Isabella Alvarez. Not in uniform this time, in a simple blouse, clipboard in hand, eyes steady. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some curious, some doubtful. A woman once dismissed was now returning. As their manager, she greeted them one by one, not formal handshakes. A nod, a glance that said, "I remember you," and they remembered her too, the woman who had reorganized a failing line, who had stayed late to help apprentices who had been cut without thanks. Inside, the machines roared to life, belts spinning, needles clattering, the air thick with oil and cotton dust. Light from high windows struck the Andalusian tiles, blue and white patterns glowing against. Steel. Isabella climbed onto a workbench. She didn't shout. Her voice cut through the noise anyway. "I know what it means to fear this place. Know what it means to wonder if today will be the day. Your badge stops working. I stood where you stand now, and I was erased." Silence spread. Even the machines seemed to soften. She raised the clipboard. "But I also know this floor carries solutions, not just problems. This map." She unrolled a flexible shift chart. "Lines and colors drawn by hand. It lets us cover illness, keep families home when needed, and still raise output 6%. Not because we cut people, because we trust them." Supervisors exchanged looks. Skeptical, intrigued. One spoke. "What if it fails?" Isabella met his gaze. "Then we adjust. Together. But we try. Because the old way failed already." A murmur ran across the floor. Not resistance. Something closer to recognition. Mateo watched from the side. He hadn't spoken a word. This was her moment. Her repair. Workers stepped forward. A seamstress offered to test. The new schedule. A machinist volunteered. To train younger staff. The energy shifted. From resignation to cautious belief. Isabella climbed down. Her hands trembled slightly, but her jaw remained firm. She turned toward Mateo, her voice low enough only he heard. "This isn't forgiveness. It's proof. If we can build trust here, maybe repair is possible." Mateo nodded. No defense, no argument, only agreement. As the shift began, the hall filled with rhythm again. Not the desperate rhythm of survival, a steadier beat. Work aligned, not forced. Outside, the city of Cadiz stirred. Church bells rang across the harbor. Seagulls wheeled above the port, their cries mixing with factory sounds. Mateo stepped into the courtyard. The salt wind pressed against his face. He thought of Lucia's sunflower box, open on the cafeteria table, of Isabella's clipboard, open on the factory bench, different tools, same purpose, not to erase, to rebuild. Instead of asking a question, let's pause here. Picture the contrast. A woman once discarded, now sketching solutions in colored ink, workers leaning closer, not away, machines humming, not as weapons of fear, but as partners of dignity. This was not charity. This was competence recognized. Finally. And for Mateo, watching from the edge of the floor, it was a glimpse of what leadership could be when repair took root. Evenings in Sevilla softened with spring. Orange blossoms perfumed the streets. Shadows stretched long across tiled courtyards. Mateo found himself climbing the narrow stairs. Above the bakery again, not as a visitor, as someone expected, Lucia met him at the door. Her hands were full of paper and crayons. "Mira, Mateo." I drew something new. She spread the page. Across the small table, 3 figures stood. Outside a house, a woman with dark hair, a little girl with braids, and a tall man in a suit without his briefcase. "That's us," she said. "Mama, me, and you, our house, when we're together." Her words landed heavier than any contract. Mateo stared at the drawing, his throat tightening. Family, sketched in crayons, and he was inside it. Isabella stirred a pot on the stove. Simple soup. Bread on the side. She glanced over, catching the look in his eyes. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," she said quietly. "You gave me dignity again. You gave Lucia hope. But you don't owe us more than that." Mateo shook his head. isn't about owing. It's about choosing, and I want to stay. The room went still, only the bubbling pot, only the faint bells outside, marking the hour. Isabella didn't answer right away. Her silence was not rejection. It was measure. Could she trust him to keep choosing? Lucia filled the pause with laughter. She pressed a folded note into Mateo's palm. Her handwriting wobbled. Letters uneven but clear. Thank you for showing up. You're part of our family now. His eyes blurred. He had cried once, over an empty lunchbox. These tears were different, born from fullness. He reached for her hand, then for Isabella's. Don't deserve this, he whispered. Isabella's grip tightened, her voice steady. You don't have to deserve it. You just have to keep choosing it. The words carved deeper than any boardroom decree. Not profit. Not. Prestige, presence, choice. Weeks unfolded into rhythm. Isabella walked each morning to the factory, head high, clipboard in hand. Workers nodded now, not out of fear, but respect. Lucia thrived at school. She no longer hid in corners. She welcomed classmates to lunch, handing out plates with joy. Her sunflower box remained, not as a shield, but as a symbol, a reminder of what had changed. And Mateo, he learned to live in smaller moments, carrying groceries up narrow stairs, listening to Isabella's plans for factory reform, helping Lucia with homework under a single dim bulb, finding joy not in control, but in presence. Reporters wrote stories. They called him the billionaire who fed a city, the man who rebuilt trust in Kata's headlines, tried to make him legend, but the real story was quieter. It lived in a drawing taped to a wall, in a folded note inside a lunchbox, in evenings when laughter filled a cramped apartment more than any gala ever had. Picture it, a man once, known for ruthless efficiency, sitting at a kitchen, table too small for his frame, soup, bread, the company of two people who believed him human, enough to belong. That was the wealth he had chased without knowing. That was the legacy Lucia's empty lunchbox had forced him to see. So the story closes not with profit margins, but with a promise whispered in a dim room. I'm not going anywhere, he said, brushing a strand of hair from Lucia's forehead as she drifted to sleep. And for the first time, he knew it was true. Thank you for walking through this story with us. If it touched you, if it made you pause, remember, these stories live because you stay. We share them to remind the world justice begins with seeing people, not just numbers. So if you believe in that, subscribe to Black Voices Justice. Every new story is another step toward change. We are grateful for your time, for your heart, and for your voice in this community. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget, your presence can fill someone else's empty table.